There are stories that we watch with tears in our eyes, a heavy heart, and that feeling of this could happen to anyone. And when the abandonment comes from those who should protect, the blow is even harder. This is the reality of many girls like Gabriela, who only wanted support but was left with the door slammed in her face, silence and humiliation. Imagine being pregnant at 19, scared, lost, and still being judged by everyone. Well, Gabriela went through that. And believe me, she slept on the street, hugging her own belly, trying to protect what dignity she still had. But it was then, when everything seemed lost, that fate decided to change the script. What would you do if a rich stranger stood in front of you at the worst moment of your life and extended his hand? Suspicion, hope. Gabriela had no idea that her story was about to become one of the most moving you will hear today. Brace your hearts. This is not just a story of an unwanted pregnancy. It is about starting over with dignity, empathy, and a transformed destiny. You may think you know difficult stories, but when a 19-year-old girl is thrown out of her home by her own parents for being pregnant, the word rejection takes on a whole new meaning. Gabriela didn't plan her pregnancy, but that didn't stop the cruel judgments of those who should have been her safe haven. The shame seemed to be more in her growing belly than in the attitudes of those who turned their backs. She tried to explain. She said it was a mistake, a single night of carelessness, but her father screamed as if she had destroyed the family's honor, and her mother cried as if burying a dream. Within minutes, Gabriela was outside, with a bag in her hands, not knowing where to go. Unwanted pregnancy is hard, but being treated like trash because of it, it's devastating. At that moment, the world showed what it came for. It is no exaggeration to say that at that moment, Gabriela discovered what it was like to be a pregnant girl expelled, alone, judged, and thrown away. And unfortunately, this is not just a story. It is a reality that repeats itself with other faces, other names, every day. But calm down. There is still a lot to happen. After her parents closed the door on her, Gabriela still tried to find shelter in bonds that she thought were unbreakable. She knocked on her aunt's door, who said that she was like a daughter. She called her friends with whom she shared secrets at college, but there she understood that when pain arrives, many people hide behind convenient excuses. Family rejection became an echo in the voices of people who swore unconditional love. With her cell phone almost dead and her heart crushed, she walked through the streets to a square where she used to play as a child. The irony was cruel. The same place that was once synonymous with freedom became a refuge for a pregnant woman on the street, trying to protect his belly with the backpack that had become a pillow. The wooden bench was hard, but it hurt less than the indifferent gaze of the world. And there, in the middle of the cold, homeless and without affection, Gabriela had her first real conversation with her baby. It was her and Luna, alone against everything. That night, she didn't know it, but the square would be the setting for her new beginning. A moving story doesn't begin with applause. It begins with silence, with pain, with abandonment. And yet, something inside her insisted on believing this can't be the end. The dawn was approaching, the cold was biting her skin. But what hurt Gabriela the most was invisible, the feeling of being forgotten, discarded. She huddled on the bench in the square as if trying to disappear, protecting her belly as if to say to the world, "I will still defend this life here." She had little, an old backpack, a thin coat, and a faith that was almost gone. But it was enough to get her through another day. When the sun threatened to rise, she would get up before the movement began. She was afraid of being seen, of being talked about, of hearing more judgments. She went to a public bathroom, washed her face with cold water, and tried to dress herself with as much dignity as possible. The reflection in the mirror showed more than a pregnant girl who had been thrown out. It showed a warrior who, even though she was injured, did not give up what strength she still had left. The shame she carried wasn't because she was pregnant. It was because she had been treated like a mistake, because she saw that expression in people's eyes that mixed pity and judgment. But even though she was humiliated, Gabriela gritted her teeth and thought, "I'll survive, even if it's with anger, even if it's alone." And that stubbornness in moving forward, oh, she would be very important in the next chapters. On her second night sleeping outside, Gabriela no longer felt the cold of the early morning. She felt the exhaustion of existing. Her body ached, her belly felt heavy, and hope seemed to have evaporated in the freezing air. As the city turned off its lights, she curled up on the bench with her coat covering her belly as a last attempt to protect the little she could still call her own. But destiny sometimes arrives silently, with low beams and unexpected intentions. A luxury car slowed down in front of the square. The man behind the wheel, in a dark suit and unshaven, slowed down without knowing why. Something about that scene stopped him. A young woman alone, hugging her belly, sleeping in the middle of the city as if the world had forgotten her. Miguel was not the impulsive type. He was used to making logical, accurate decisions. But at that moment, instinct spoke louder than reason. He got out of the car slowly, as if he were stepping into a sacred place. He didn't know her name, her story, or why she was there. He just knew he had to do something. What Miguel didn't yet realize was that unexpected help would become the turning point of two lives, and that, even without wanting to, he had just opened the door to astery that touches in truth. Miguel was a man accustomed to control, CEO of $1 million startup, quick decisions, tight schedule. But that early morning disarmed him. When he saw Gabriela sleeping in the square, something inside him stirred in a way that neither profit nor numbers had ever provoked. And it was with the simplicity of a gesture that he approached her, without rushing, without invasive questions, just with the look of someone who sees a life where others see problems. "Are you okay?" That's what he said, in a soft, respectful voice. Gabriela woke up startled, as if she had already expected to be chased away. But Miguel wasn't like the others. He didn't offer her money, nor did he speak as if she were a burden. He simply extended his hand with a calmness that was rare in times of rush. And that, for someone who only knew the pain of family rejection, it was like a breeze in the desert. It was hard to trust, of course. After all, how many times had life smiled only to turn its back on us? But Miguel insisted gently without forcing. It wasn't pity. It was something purer, empathy. And it was there, in that unlikely encounter between Arichman and a simple woman, which began a true exchange. The kind of encounter that transforms destinies, even when neither of them yet understands what is happening. Gabriela hesitated. After all, how many stories began with promises and ended in traps? But hunger, cold, and fatigue shouted louder than pride. Accepting help was not weakness, it was survival. With trembling hands and a heart divided between fear and relief, she got into Miguel's car. For the first time in days, she felt the heat of the heater and the silence that didn't hurt. The hotel was simple but comfortable. When she received the room key and a card with his phone number, Gabriela felt like crying, not from pain, but from surprise. That gesture, so direct, so honest, touched something she thought she had lost, the ability to trust. For the first time, someone saw in her more than just a person, pregnant girl expelled. I saw a person with value, with history, with a future. Alone in her room, she took a hot bath, put on her only clean clothes, and cried in peace. It was the first step in AI's start over with dignity. The mattress felt like a cloud, but it was in Miguel's gesture, respectful, without ulterior motives, that she found her first foundation. She didn't know yet if she could trust him completely. But at that moment, she no longer felt completely alone. The next day, Gabriela could hardly believe that she was still in a clean room, with soft pillows and an apple on the coffee table. But what really touched her was the envelope delivered to the front desk, a handwritten letter in a firm, gentle handwriting. It was from Miguel, and from the very first lines, she realized, it was not a proposal of charity, it was an invitation to hope. In the letter, he said he didn't want to know about her past, that he didn't demand explanations. He just wanted to offer her a chance to start over, with dignity, in her own time, in her own way. You don't read that every day, especially coming from a millionaire who helps a pregnant woman without charging anything in return. That was not common, and Gabriela felt it in her chest. The gesture touched her more deeply than beautiful words. She reread the letter several times, as if testing the truth behind each sentence. The world had always demanded a lot from her: justifications, regrets, apologies. Miguel, no. He only offered space, time, a gesture of respect. And that was when she began to think, could fate really be changing this time? Could it be possible that this meeting was more than just a coincidence? Gabriela was no longer naive. After so many doors slammed in her face, she had learned to build walls around her heart. But Miguel didn't seem to want to rush in. He stayed outside, waiting. He brought her coffee, asked about the day, talked about traffic, silly movies, the weather, anything that wouldn't hurt. Little by little, his presence became routine, and with it came something rare: security. It was different from anything she had ever experienced. There was no pressure, no demands. Miguel didn't ask about the child's father or about the past. He looked Gabriela in the eyes as if to say, "You don't need to explain yourself to exist." This, for someone who has been through a motherhood in solitude, it was almost a miracle. And even with the fear pulsing, she began to smile again, even without realizing it. It wasn't an instant crush, nor a fairy tale. It was a silent affection, cultivated in the details, in the way he respected her silences, in the way he waited for her yes, without forcing it. Trust, it doesn't come out of nowhere. It builds itself step by step. And it was at this calm and steady pace that Gabriela began to let her guard down. Maybe, just maybe, she was no longer alone in the battle. One day, Miguel came up with an idea that at first glance seemed simple: to show Gabriela an empty room in a nondescript building in the city. But for her, it was like entering a new world. The space was small, with large windows and an old table, but it held something rare: possibility. This wasn't just a room, it was a clear sign that he believed in her. No strings attached, no contracts, just trust. Use it however you want. Study, rest, sell something. It's yours if you want. That's what he said, handing her the key casually. Gabriela stared at the room, feeling for the first time that someone was offering her a future. And it wasn't a favor, it was a bridge. A symbol of what can happen when someone believes in you, even when the world has discarded you for being a fool. Pregnant woman on the street. She began to go there every day. He wrote ideas in an old notebook, scribbled plans, created. The room was her little corner of freedom, a refuge where she could be more than a survivor. She could dream. And there, at that simple table, she began to plan a life change reel. A small step for the world, but a gigantic one for someone who had lost everything, and little by little was rebuilding himself. In that silent room, among scribbles and cups of coffee, Gabriela rediscovered something she had forgotten: herself. Not the expelled pregnant girl, nor the rejected woman, but Gabriela, curious, creative, full of desire to do something of her own. Each page written in the notebook was a step in rebuilding her self-esteem. The shame that had previously silenced her began to give way to a new sound, that of self-confidence. She began researching ways to start a business. She thought of opening an online store for mothers, something simple with handmade or carefully selected products. If I can help other pregnant women who feel lost like me, that's worth it, she muttered to herself. It wasn't about money, it was about purpose. The idea of a small business gave color to what had previously been just survival. And Miguel, he watched from a distance, always ready but without interfering. He offered her books, brought her coffee with cinnamon, just the way she liked it, and, when she needed it, he listened. This kind of support, firm, but not suffocating, made all the difference. And it was in this welcoming environment that Gabriela understood that resilience. It's not about winning all at once. It's about starting over every day, with courage and a plan in the drawer. Miguel didn't make pretty speeches. He showed up with a hot coffee, a kind word, and some time available. And that was exactly what made him different. It wasn't about grand gestures, but about consistency. Gabriela, accustomed to empty promises and noisy absences, found his presence strange, which demanded nothing. And it was there, in their daily lives, that the bond between them began to take shape. Sometimes she would laugh without realizing it at the silly things he said. Other times, he would wait outside the pharmacy while she took her time choosing a stretch mark cream. He never barged in. And over time, she began to wait for him without admitting it. It was a feeling that didn't need to be named. It was care. It was acceptance. It was true love under construction, even without a label. There was no "I love you" shouted from the rooftops, but there was comfortable silence, respect between the lines, and a look that said, "I'm here." And often, that's worth more than 1,000 words. Gabriela knew that what she felt went beyond gratitude, and Miguel, even without understanding everything, could no longer imagine walking through the square without remembering her. And Luna, the transformed destiny of the two, was being written with gestures. That morning, Gabriela woke up with a different pain. Strong, rhythmic, impossible to ignore. She picked up her cell phone and, without thinking much, called Miguel. "I think it's time," she said with a shaky voice. He arrived in less than 10 minutes, more nervous than she was. Her water broke in the car. Her heart raced, and so did his. There was no turning back. It was time. At the hospital, Miguel stood outside the delivery room, pacing back and forth, as if waiting for the world to be born. And in a way, that was exactly what it was. When the nurse came out smiling and said, "Congratulations, Dad," he swallowed hard. He wanted to correct himself, but he couldn't. He just smiled. When he entered the room and saw Gabriela, tired but radiant, with Luna in her arms, he understood what it was like to be where he was supposed to be. Gabriela held the baby out to him. "She's yours too," she said softly, as if she were sharing a secret. Miguel took Luna in his arms with all the care in the world. She was small and fragile, but she carried an immense weight, that of being a symbol of a new beginning. He looked at her as if he were looking at a promise. And Gabriela, for the first time, didn't feel alone in that maternity ward. She had a daughter, and now she also had a family. While Gabriela was still recovering in the hospital, Miguel stepped forward. He said nothing, promised nothing, he just did it. He went back to the small apartment attached to the living room where she used to plan her days, and began preparing the space. He bought a white crib, just like the one she had looked at in the store window weeks before. A mobile of clouds and stars spun silently in the corner of the room. Every detail seemed to have been drawn from her memory. In the kitchen, there were flowery dish towels, a new kettle, and a little note stuck to the fridge with a heart-shaped magnet. It was all simple, but full of meaning. When Gabriela walked in with Luna in her arms and saw the transformed place, she couldn't hold back her tears. Miguel had done everything as if he had known her tastes for years. It wasn't ostentation, it was care. A rare kind of care, unexpected help that overflows with love. She walked slowly through the space, observing the details, absorbing the affection that lived there. "I don't know how to thank you," she murmured, and Miguel, with that calm way, replied, "You don't need to thank, just live." At that moment, Gabriela realized that it wasn't just a roof, it was a home, a place where her story of overcoming could finally blossom, and where Luna would have the beginning she never had. Gabriela still found herself doubting herself sometimes. Fear doesn't disappear overnight, especially when life has already shown you its claws. She looked at Miguel and thought, "Is all this real? Will it end suddenly like everything else I've ever experienced?" Motherhood in solitude left scars, and trust was a slow process, full of emotional pitfalls. But inside, something was beginning to give. Miguel didn't rush anything. He stayed. When she cried, he stayed. When she closed herself off, he respected her. He didn't promise castles, he promised presence, and that was a rare promise. Gabriela, little by little, began to understand that love is not a shout, it's a gesture. It's not a spectacle, it's constancy. And on any given Saturday, with Luna sleeping in her crib and the two of them on the couch, she said in a barely audible voice, "I accept what we are." The kiss that came next wasn't like a soap opera. It was calm, full of truth, with a taste of a new beginning. She was still scared, yes, but she learned that to truly love is to have the courage to give yourself even with a patched-up heart. And Miguel didn't want someone perfect. He just wanted the woman she already was, strong, sweet, determined, the one he found sleeping in a square and who now smiled in the home they built together. What began with tears and abandonment ended with laughter and routine. Nothing luxurious, nothing fancy, just simple days full of little rituals that make life worth living. Breakfast with bread and juice, Luna's naps after lunch, afternoons in the park. Gabriela still had her moments of insecurity, but now there were hands ready to hold hers. She no longer had to pretend to be strong all the time. Miguel, in turn, would leave his work folder aside to watch children's cartoons or look for diapers in the middle of the night. Who would have thought rich man who helped a simple woman now changed diapers and warmed bottles with pride? But he knew it wasn't about saving anyone. It was about walking together. He didn't change Gabriela's life. They built a new one side by side. And Luna grew up surrounded by something rare. True love. She may never have known how much her arrival transformed two wounded souls, but all she had to do was see them together to understand. There was something there that the world does not give easily. Reception, hope, and most importantly, a transformed destiny. Because sometimes what seems like the end is just the most beautiful beginning of all. In the end, Gabriela discovered something that pain never taught her. It is possible to flourish even after being ripped from the ground. Her unwanted pregnancy was the starting point of a journey she could never have imagined. And who would have thought? That pregnant girl who was expelled, humiliated, who slept in a square, was now a mother, entrepreneur, and companion. Not by luck, but because had the courage not to give up. Miguel has also changed. The serious, methodical businessman began to see the world through different eyes. He understood that empathy is not a luxury, it is a choice. Help a pregnant woman on the street could be the beginning of a story of love, affection, and partnership. He didn't save Gabriela, he just reached out when no one else did. And it was with that simple gesture that it all began. This is one of those stories that touch because they remind us that the greatest miracles are born from pain. That even on the worst days, life can surprise us. That when everything seems lost, love, the true kind that embraces and transforms, can appear on a park bench, in the handwriting of a letter, or in the smile of a baby named Luna. Because sometimes the improbable is all we need. What about you? Have you ever thought about how many times we ignore someone who just needed a chance? How many Gabrielas pass us by every day, invisible, judged, alone, without us even giving them a sympathetic look? Maybe their story touched you because deep down, you also carry wounds, memories, or new beginnings that no one has seen. But what if this is the moment to transform pain into strength? To resignify the past and believe, once again, that true love can indeed blossom, even in the midst of chaos? Would you let fear hold you back, or would you take that step, like Gabriela did, even though you were shaking inside? Comment below. Do you believe in new beginnings? Have you ever experienced a situation where unexpected help changed everything? Subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and share this video with someone who needs hope today, because stories like this deserve to be told and perhaps lived again by someone like you.